Hello, I'm Sharon.
And I'm Wendy.
Welcome
Welcome
to
to
Brown
Brown
Space.
Space.
This is a safe space where we talk about the hard topic of racism.
And build empathy through the healing power of conversation.
Thank you for joining us. All right, let's talk, right? I just
Dude,
wanted to hear more about the this whole idea of white fragility and where that comes from and how do you feel about that? How do you fit into that?
well, I am a really good example of white fragility. I am embarrassed to admit because I had never even heard that phrase until May or June of this year. And it's been out there for a number of years. So I am a good illustration of white fragility, which is the fear that a lot of white people have surrounding talking about race. It's almost like we're so paranoid to offend somebody by our whiteness and our lack of understanding for what anybody else truly experiences on a day-to-day basis, um, that we live in a state of unacknowledged apology. And
Mm.
if we avoid it, maybe we won't offend you. If I don't talk about race, maybe you'll be my friend and we'll just get along okay. If I don't
Wow.
talk about race, maybe you won't notice it either. And then we can say, I don't see color. And we get to the happy place really fast.
Wow. Talk about escape or avoidance.
Yeah.
There's just so many layers to having real, authentic, transparent conversation to get to that place to where we can really talk about making a change or making a difference. So this game that we're playing as a different races and escaping the reality of what's going on is it's a scary thought. Are we ever going to get there?
Well, I wouldn't have been able to say, yes, I do believe we will as readily, except for that you and I, as individuals, have been, you have held space for me to journey from paranoia, just fear, basically. Like, let's talk a little bit more about that avoidance, because it's not really coming from a place of intentional denial or intentional hurt. Like, I would never want to deny your experience, but I think a lot of white people have guilt over what history reveals about our past as a nation and about our race as Caucasians in this country and elsewhere. Um, it's guilt. So, like, to be able to go, okay, I know I didn't personally do this and personally perpetuate it, and yet this is the thing that I finally woke up to. If I don't actively help make a change now, then I am personally contributing to its perpetuation. The differences between races and opportunity based on skin color.
So it's moving from that place of, oh, this is such a horrible thing.
Mhm.
How could we have allowed this to happen? And tisk, tisk, tisk. This is just so horrible.
Mhm.
And moving deeper into that space of, I want to be that change.
Yeah.
I keep tisk, tisk, tisking about that I want to see. I have to be the change.
Yes. And part of it is that the reality of the history of people of African descent in this country is so horrible that it's like shockingly painful to suddenly realize that we had no idea how bad it really was, because it's glossed over in schools. And I'm not saying that children should be traumatized by, you know, depictions of the reality of slavery, etc., that give them nightmares. That's like talking about the Holocaust in such detail that they're traumatized by it the rest of their lives, which is actually what happened to my mother, um, as a young child when she had to go live in Germany after World War II. So, like, she never got over it her entire life. And I'm not saying we should traumatize each other, but there is an awakening that has to happen. And so, what I referenced in our personal friendship is that you held space for me to wake up, to do my own soul search and crying about, and I'm going to continue to, because I continue to learn new things as I can handle it, because sometimes it's overwhelming. I spent almost 6 solid weeks being overwhelmed by what I was learning, and I couldn't get anything else accomplished. Unfortunately, it was summertime and I was on summer break from working, um, teaching, but it really was like, okay, I'm going to immerse myself in this. And I was overwhelmed and I was emotional. And then I would like binge on superhero Netflix just to like, okay, get it out. And then I'd go back to it during the daylight again, but you were like, okay, here's my friend Wendy. We've never really talked about race, and she's asking me, how am I after that terrible event?
Hmm.
We need to say their names, don't we?
George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery. There are so many more.
So many.
There are a lot, and you and I have done some research and we've seen the long list. I've heard people say, oh, okay, you're focusing on 19 or 20 people as opposed to da 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 da. And it's like, oh no, there's so many more than 19 or 20, and I think that's part of that hiding that's taking place.
Mhm.
Um, I do, however, believe that as Black people or people of color, that we have a responsibility in, as you say, sharing space or opening space so that a real communication can happen. I had a friend, and I think I shared a little bit with you about her. Just very active, sweet, sweet person, has given of herself so much, very, very progressive. And she shared a text message with me of a dear friend, and her going ons about all the injustices and inequities that people of color have endured. And she was just so broken because she didn't know how to respond. And so I did almost basically the same thing with her as I did with you, but in a text form.
Mhm.
And she was like, Sharon, I absolutely, to me, everything was fine. I absolutely had no idea that this was so serious. And so, the Black Sharon would want to go, are you serious? Are you kidding me? Like, what do you mean you have no idea? What are you talking about? But the her sincerity of heart, had to get me to that place of, oh my gosh, she really had no idea. You know, we have to be open to the fact that people just don't know. People who are not of color, their lives are such that they don't understand the depth of the hurt
Yeah.
until we are able to communicate from a place of love. that look, this is going on and we need each other in order to make that change or make that difference.
Yes. Um, it's kind of convoluted, but I'm realizing someone of color has a lot of power to help someone who's white wake up in their own consciousness.
Hmm.
And it is, like you just said, through love, which is huge. And I feel like, how can we even ask that of of the black community? You know, it sounds like, oh, you have to grow so much in love now so that you can educate us. I'm like, oh, I think that's an objection that I hear too. And I feel like there's a lot more that we can do, white people can do, without
Yeah.
leaning on our black friends, our black brothers and sisters so much. But I do appreciate my friends of color who are willing to have hard conversations with me, and point me in the right direction.
Yeah, there, I mean, there has to be that place of learning, teaching and learning, and then that place of empowerment for the individual who's learning. Okay, I am now empowered enough to go make that change, to do something, not always leaning on. So, why is this or why is that? Can you tell me this? Can you tell? That's not what I'm saying, but we
Yeah,
have to be open enough to allow for that communication so that actually both sides, everyone can be empowered to then
yeah,
work together to make a change.
yeah. And I think that was one of the things I really appreciated about your definition of leadership, which I'll probably always come back to in conversation, because you talk about leading yourself. So, how do I individually want to lead myself? And when something hits me or someone is coming at me with anger, how do I want to lead myself in that moment to respond? Or if someone comes at me with ignorance, are they intentionally ignorant? Do we choose ignorance? White fragility chooses ignorance. Okay, I will say that's a thing. But the only reason I think that human beings choose ignorance is out of fear. So you have, when you, Sharon Hill, have compassion for somebody in a moment like that, instead of getting angry, that is a huge turning point. I mean, you really bless your ignorant white friends when you do that.
I don't even want to say. I mean, there is ignorance, and then there is just stupidity, right? So, I have to be careful. Our words, our choice of words, and the way that we use our words towards each other across in any relationship across the board
Yeah,
makes a huge difference,
yeah.
right? So, I wouldn't say that because you're an intelligent human being. I know you to be as such. So I wouldn't say that you're ignorant. I feel like that is just so harsh, you know. Unaware
Unaware. But
and
I think being unaware, when we allow fear to perpetuate a lack of awareness, then we're willfully embracing a level of ignorance.
ignorance.
Then we
Yes.
So I think white fragility that refuses to look at the situation, especially now, uh, now we're venturing to, okay, maybe you need to go to therapy to really look at the fear that you're hanging on to. Why? What is that fear? Where is it coming from? I mean, honestly, do you think it's educated? It's just educated in people, isn't it? Like,
Hmm.
yeah. And I don't even think it's intentionally evil, but the fruits of it end up being pretty bad.
There's I guess an instinct in us to want to preserve the happy place, as you put it, or to keep that space instinctively.
Mm. Yeah.
But that's the thing, though, growth outside of what it is that makes you feel good instinctively is, it's gonna hurt, it's gonna be uncomfortable, it's gonna, it's those things that you don't want, it's those things that I'm afraid of,
Hmm.
that if you can face it, then there's growth, and then there's empowerment, and then there's development and
Hmm.
action and movement and change. Yes.
Absolutely. And that goes from individual to individual until an entire community and society can change. Yeah, that's so true. When things
Yeah.
are hard and scary, and we go, okay, it's hard and scary because it's calling for change. Maybe I should face it. I love that. I love your use of the word empowerment too. Yeah.
Hmm.
Brene Brown talks about that process as being the path to wholehearted living.
I remember you were so excited about that book, and you would share different parts of it when we would go out to our little lunches when
That's
you were
right.
here.
Was that 2 and 3 years ago now, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I never got the book, but I remembered some of the things that you were sharing. Um, and I think I
Well,
looked her up and just got little snippets. Very progressive
mhm,
thoughts.
mhm.
Thoughts.
Yeah. And while they came out of, overcoming, well, it's perfect actually, overcoming a sense of shame. So I think, and she's talking individually, but she's also looking at shame on a social level. So white fragility is like the ultimate of a social level shame,
Mm.
a shame storm, as she calls it. Yeah. Wow. Wow. I had never thought of it like that. And
Yeah.
you're right though, we can't just go to that happy place. Oh, okay. Sorry. I love this. I love analogies. Here's a goofy analogy for you. It's Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So she wants her happy place, but she can't just end up there, even though she had the power all along, right? There's no place like home. She has the power all along, but first she has to go on this journey. And then she
Mm-hmm.
finally comes to her happy place. And I think there is absolutely, to answer your initial question, yes, we can get there. We can get to that place one day, and it might be generations out, that says we don't see color, we just see people. But right now, we're at the beginning of our journey through Oz. We haven't found the ruby slippers power yet.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to acknowledge first the good in our differences. Like,
Absolutely.
you can be any color, but you are still a human being that I want to respect and honor, and that it's a privilege to know each other and acknowledge historical hurt. And I don't mean historical of hundreds of years only. I mean today and yesterday, like in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
it's yeah.
It is a daily thing. It's a daily choosing.
Mm,
It's a daily choosing. How am I going to be in the world or in front of whoever God puts in front of me?
mm,
It's a daily choosing. I had a meeting this morning the divide is not only a racial divide, but it is an age divide as well. And so as the president, I could choose to be the president, large and in charge, and this is how it's going to go down. And they would probably go, okay, well, this is how we've always done it. So here, there you go. Whatever it is you say, yes, sirree, boss, ma'am. But how does that leave room or space for positive change and growth?
Yeah.
Right. So I have to self talk, right? Because I'm in an environment that is different.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a group of people of color.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a group of uh, people who are in their 50s and 60s. These are older.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, how am I going to come to them? I have to make that choice of let me listen, let me process what it is that I am hearing. Let me not toss out everything they have to say because everything I have to say matters,
Mm-hmm.
but everything you have to say doesn't matter anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I have to choose that and I have to tell myself that because my mama used to always say, I have a lot of mama sayings, which you probably read in my book, right?
Yes.
But she always used to say, you can catch more bees with honey than with vinegar.
Yeah.
So it's a choice.
Yeah. You have actually three hurdles because you have not just age or just skin color, but gender.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You're in a room of older white men, and you are the only woman, the only younger, the youngest by far, and you're not white.
Well,
Clearly.
it doesn't bother me to be the only in
Mm-hmm.
any situation because a lot of times that's where I've found myself throughout my life. And I think that all of that has been a preparation and a leading to where I am right now, today, having this conversation with you.
Mm-hmm.
It was all a preparation because I was always in that situation more often than usual.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it has prepared me, it has prepared my heart, it has prepared my mind to have that empathetic, um, compassionate approach to everyone
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to just speak the truth
With kindness.
to who, yeah,
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that you've been the only so many times, or just really often. I've been the only female, and I've been many, many times in small groups, large groups. Um, I've been the only US citizen, maybe, around different ethnicities. The only one who didn't speak Spanish in the room. Um, but only once in my life have I been the only of my race. And that is when I went to Japan for a week.
wow,
Yeah.
that's
And
interesting.
it was really an interesting experience. And so it gave me such insight into what it must or might feel like to be in this country and be a minority based on race.
Hmm.
So you had circled back about the that happy place of inclusivity and I don't see color, and I wanted to something that was really heavy on my heart this summer was um, seeing how so many people responded, so many white people reacted to the renewed efforts of Black Lives Matter, and sort of the heightened call of Black Lives Matter. And the response that all lives matter, to me, was missing the point. Of course, like you said, we know all lives matter.
Yeah, we
But,
absolutely do.
right? It's not about denying the importance of someone else's life. It's about pointing out that too many lives have been denied based on skin color. Too many people have been excluded for too long for something as random as skin color. And I personally don't think that we can get to that happy place of I don't see color, all lives matter, until we celebrate everyone who's been denied based on color or gender or sexual preference. I mean, all of it. This exclusivity, this marginalization has to stop. And the only way we're going to heal that rift is through, like you have always said, conversation that builds empathy, that helps us out of our fearful unawareness or ignorance or fragility, and to really celebrate and lift up everyone who has been discriminated against before we can say all lives matter.
As you're saying that, I remembered at one point that there was this push for, and these are great words. We should absolutely respect each other,
Mm.
regardless of color.
Mhm.
One human being to the next.
Mhm.
You teach that in your household with your own family and your children. You are to respect each other as well as your elders, not just respect your elders. I know in my household that's how I taught them, but you
Mhm.
are to respect each other. So respect is a great um, ideal
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
terms of character. And so there was this respect and tolerance. And I think I shared that with you before about that word tolerance, that I don't want to be tolerated.
Yeah.
I would like to be appreciated and celebrated.
Mhm.
Okay. And
Understood.
the only way that we can appreciate and celebrate each other is if we know each other.
Mhm. Yeah.
I can always respect you whether I know you or not. And I will tolerate you in the room whether I know you or not. But it has to go past that.
Yes.
It has to go past that.
Amen. Yeah. Oh, tolerance. When did that word come up? When
That
was
was a thing.
was that back in the 80s or the 70s or something?
It was the 80s, the 90s, maybe even the 2000s.
What does that even mean? Because you're right. That's just
That's
ugly.
what they taught in the schools.
Yeah. Tolerance. We're going to tolerate each other. You're right. That actually perpetuates a rift.
Yes.
Ugh, I had never thought of it like that. That's gross. Okay. Well, Sharon, I celebrate you.
Wendy, I appreciate you and I celebrate you. Mwah. You've been watching Brown Space with Sharon and Wendy.
It's been so great talking and sharing here today. We look forward to your comments below, or you can email us at brownspace2020@gmail.com.
Remember, you are the light that gives light to the world.